The signature line on the acquisition document blurred before my eyes. Not from tears, but from the sudden recognition of a name I hadn't seen in 7 years. The name of the man who once told me I would never amount to anything. The man who handed me divorce papers on the day I lost our child. The man who was now sitting across this mahogany conference table in my boardroom, waiting for my approval to save his collapsing empire. His pen hovered over the contract. He hadn't looked up yet. He didn't know. The silence in the room felt like glass about to crack. 43 floors above the streets of Bellport City, in the executive suite of Meridian Capital Holdings, I watched him struggle to maintain composure. His custom Brioni suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. The Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, probably worth more than the apartment I'd lived in after he left, caught the afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a city I now helped shape. 7 years ago, I had nothing. No money, no degree, no family willing to claim me after the miscarriage. He walked away from our marriage 3 weeks after the funeral of a child who never took a first breath, saying he needed someone stronger by his side, someone who could handle the pressure of his ascending career in commercial real estate, someone who wouldn't drag him down with grief. Today, I am the majority shareholder of the fund that holds the deed to every property his company leveraged. I am the unnamed investor his board begged to meet. I am the signature he needs to survive. And he still hasn't looked up. My assistant, Patricia, a woman with silver hair and eyes that miss nothing, stood by the door. She knew. Everyone in this room knew except him. The tension was delicious, terrible, and entirely earned. "Mr. Brennan," I said quietly, letting my voice fill the space between us. "Before you sign, I think you should know who's approving this deal." He looked up then. The color drained from his face so completely that for a moment I thought he might actually faint. His mouth opened, closed. The pen slipped from his fingers and rolled across the polished surface, leaving a thin ink trail like a wound. "Hello, Julian," I said. "It's been a long time. If you're listening to this story and you've ever been left behind, discarded, or told you weren't enough, this is for you. You are seen. You are valued. Your rise is coming. If you're with Mr. Douglas Tales, comment, 'I rise above every storm.' Now, let me take you back to where it all began. We met at a charity gala I had no business attending. I was 23, working as an event coordinator's assistant, making sure the champagne flutes were filled and the napkins were folded. Julian was 28, already climbing the ranks at Brennan and Associates, his family's commercial real estate firm. He noticed me because I caught a tray of glasses before they crashed into a senator's wife. "Quick hands," he'd said, smiling in that way that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. "Occupational necessity," I'd replied. He laughed, asked for my number. 3 months later, we were engaged. 6 months after that, married in a small ceremony at the courthouse because his mother refused to attend a proper wedding for someone from my background. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself love was enough. For the first 2 years, I believed it. Julian worked long hours. I supported him, managed our modest apartment in the Riverside district, and took night classes in business administration. I wanted to build something too, wanted to prove I was more than just the girl who caught falling champagne glasses. But every time I mentioned an idea, a small consulting business, a return to school full-time, he'd pat my hand and say, Let's wait until things settle down, sweetheart. Things never settled down. His career accelerated. Mine stagnated. I became the wife who attended functions, smiled at his colleagues, and pretended not to notice when he introduced me as my wife instead of by name. I became furniture in our marriage, necessary but unremarkable. The cracks started small: a missed dinner, a forgotten anniversary, conversations that felt like transactions rather than connections. When I got pregnant, I thought it would change things, thought it would bring us back to center. I was wrong. I lost the baby in the second trimester. A girl. We'd already picked a name. Lily. The hospital room was sterile and cold. Julian held my hand through the worst of it, but his phone kept buzzing with work calls. Even in grief, he was half present. When we got home 3 days later, he returned to work immediately, said he needed to keep busy, to process things, said he'd take time off later. He never did. I drowned in silence for weeks. Our apartment became a mausoleum of empty nursery plans and unspoken pain. I tried to talk to him, tried to bridge the distance that had opened between us like a chasm. But Julian had already left emotionally long before he handed me the papers. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the funeral. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink, when he walked in carrying a leather folder. "I think we need to talk," he said. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. He sat across from me, wouldn't meet my eyes, and slid the folder forward. Divorce papers, already drawn up, already signed by him. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly. "I need someone who can handle the life I'm building, someone who won't fall apart when things get hard. You're too fragile now. This isn't what I signed up for." I stared at him, at this man I'd loved, supported, believed in. This man who was abandoning me in the darkest moment of my life because I wasn't convenient anymore. "I lost our child," I whispered. "3 weeks ago, I lost our daughter." "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry, but I can't carry your grief and mine and still build my career. My mother was right. We were never a good match." He stood up, adjusted his tie, looked at me with something that might have been pity. "The settlement is fair," he said. "You'll get half of what we built together. That should be enough to start over." Half of what we built together was $47,000. The cost of his watch. He moved out that day, moved in with Natasha Collymore, a corporate attorney from his firm. 3 weeks later, the divorce was finalized in 4 months. I signed the papers in a legal aid office that smelled like instant coffee and broken dreams. Julian Brennan walked away from our marriage without looking back, and I was left with nothing but a studio apartment in the industrial district, a GED, night school credits that led nowhere, and a grief so vast I couldn't see the edges. But here's what Julian didn't know. Here's what no one knew. I was done falling apart. The woman I became in those 7 years would have been unrecognizable to the person Julian left behind. I took the $47,000 settlement and made a single, desperate bet. I used it to finish my business degree, accelerated program, online courses, every available scholarship. I graduated in 18 months with a focus on financial analysis and corporate restructuring. Then I took an entry-level position at a struggling investment firm called Helix Partners, working 80-hour weeks for barely minimum wage. But I learned. God, did I learn. I learned how deals were structured, how debt could be leveraged or weaponized, how companies rose and fell based on single decisions. I learned to read balance sheets the way some people read novels, seeing the story beneath the numbers, the desperation hidden in quarterly reports, the opportunities disguised as failures. Within 3 years, I'd identified 6 companies on the verge of collapse that were actually diamonds buried in debt. I convinced Helix's managing partner to let me lead the restructuring. We bought them for pennies, turned them around, and sold them for millions. By year 5, I had my own fund, Meridian Capital Holdings. By year 6, I was managing $800 million in assets. By year 7, I was the silent hand behind some of the largest corporate acquisitions in Bellport City, and I'd made very sure that Julian Brennan never knew my name was attached to any of it. Until today. The boardroom was silent after my greeting. Julian's face had gone through several shades of pale before settling on a sickly grey. His colleague, a nervous man named Richard something, looked between us with growing alarm. I don't understand, Julian finally managed. His voice was smaller than I remembered. You're the investor? Majority shareholder, I corrected, keeping my tone professionally pleasant. Meridian Capital Holdings acquired the debt portfolio that includes your company's primary assets 6 months ago. When your board requested a restructuring meeting, I decided to take it personally. Why? The question hung in the air. Why would I help the man who destroyed me? Why would I even be in the same room? I smiled, not warmly. Because business is business, Julian, and your company is worth saving, despite its leadership. Patricia cleared her throat softly. Ms. Reeves, the terms are outlined in Section 3. Mr. Brennan's company will retain operational control, but Meridian will hold veto power on all major decisions for the next 5 years. The debt restructuring will save Brennan and Associates from bankruptcy, but at the cost of autonomy. I watched Julian process this. Watched him realize that I now controlled his family's legacy, that every decision he made would run through me, that the power dynamic had reversed so completely that he was now the one asking for mercy. The alternative, I continued, is that we foreclose, liquidate assets. Your family loses everything they've built over 3 generations. Your mother's foundation loses its funding. Your name becomes associated with the largest commercial real estate collapse in Bellport City history. You'd do that? His voice cracked. After everything? After everything, I interrupted, and for the first time, let a sliver of ice enter my tone. You mean after you left me with nothing? After you divorced me for grieving our child? After you told me I'd never amount to anything? I leaned forward slightly. Julian, I'm not doing this to you. I'm doing this despite you. Your company is a good investment. That's the only reason we're having this conversation. He stared at me, really looked at me for the first time, saw the tailored Armani suit that cost more than our old apartment's monthly rent, saw the confidence I'd built from ashes, saw the woman he'd underestimated so completely that he never imagined this moment was possible. I'll need to discuss this with my board, he said weakly. You have 72 hours, I replied. After that, the offer expires. I stood. Patricia handed me my leather portfolio. I walked toward the door, then paused. Julian, I said, not turning around. I hope you find someone strong enough to stand beside you. I certainly wasn't her, but perhaps that says more about what you needed than what I lacked. I left him sitting in my boardroom, drowning in the reality of who I'd become. The call came at 11 p.m. that night. I was in my penthouse, a sprawling space on the 52nd floor of the Meridian Tower with views that stretched across the harbour, reviewing acquisition reports when my private line rang. Only 5 people had this number. Julian wasn't one of them. "How did you get this number?" I answered. "Patricia gave it to me." His voice sounded raw. She said you'd probably expect me to call." Patricia was too perceptive for her own good. I made a mental note to give her a raise. "What do you want, Julian?" "To apologize." I almost laughed. Little late for that." "I know." He took a shaky breath. "I know it's 7 years too late. I know I don't deserve your time or your consideration or anything else, but I need you to know that I—" He stopped, started again. "What I did to you was unforgivable. I was a coward. I was cruel. And I've regretted it every single day since." I walked to the window, looked out at the city lights reflecting off the water. Somewhere out there was the studio apartment where I'd cried myself to sleep for months. Somewhere out there was the hospital where I'd lost Lily. Somewhere out there was the courthouse where Julian had erased our marriage. Like it meant nothing. "Do you remember what you said to me?" I asked quietly. "The day you gave me the papers?" "I remember all of it. You said I was too fragile, that I wasn't what you signed up for, that you needed someone stronger." I turned away from the window. "Do you know what that did to me, Julian? I wasn't just grieving our daughter. I was grieving the only person I thought would never leave. And you walked away like I was a business deal, gone bad." "I know." "No," I said. "You don't. Because if you knew, truly knew, you wouldn't have done it. But that's in the past now. And I'm not interested in apologies that come 7 years too late and only because you need something from me." "That's not why I'm calling, isn't it?" Silence. "Sign the papers, Julian," I said. "Save your company. Move on with your life. But don't call this number again." I hung up before he could respond. The Bellport Commerce Gala was the social event of the year, a gathering of the city's wealthiest investors, politicians, and business leaders. Attendance was by invitation only. This year, Meridian Capital Holdings was a platinum sponsor, which meant I had a front row table and a speaking slot. It also meant Julian would be there. I arrived in a midnight blue gown that cost more than our old apartment. Custom Valentino, tailored to perfection. My hair was swept up in a style that took 2 hours to achieve but looked effortless. Diamond earrings that had belonged to the widow of a textile magnate caught the light as I moved through the crowd. I looked like I belonged here, because I did. Patricia appeared at my elbow. "The Brennan party is at table 12, she murmured. "He brought Natasha." Of course he did. The woman he'd left me for. The corporate attorney who was strong enough for his life. "Good," I said. "Let them watch." My speech was scheduled for 9 p.m. I used the time before to work the room, shaking hands with the governor, discussing policy with the city's planning commissioner, laughing at a joke from the CEO of Clearwater Industries. I could feel eyes on me, could feel the whispers starting as people realized who I was, what I controlled, how young I was to have built what I'd built. And at table 12, Julian watched it all. When they announced my name, I walked to the stage with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. The speech I'd prepared was about economic resilience and strategic investment, but halfway through, I decided to go off script. 7 years ago, I said, looking out at the sea of faces, I had nothing, no money, no connections, no safety net. I was told I would never amount to anything, that I wasn't strong enough to build a life worth living. And for a while, I believed it. The room had gone quiet. But here's what I learned. The people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest gift. They're lowering their guard. They're making assumptions. They're not watching you build something they can't imagine. And by the time they realize who you've become, you're already too far ahead for them to catch up. I smiled, let my gaze drift, just for a moment, toward table 12. So to everyone who's ever been told they're not enough, you are. To everyone who's ever been left behind, keep walking. To everyone who's ever started over from nothing, your rise is inevitable. The applause was thunderous. As I stepped off the stage, the governor himself intercepted me, wanting to discuss an infrastructure investment opportunity. 3 other CEOs followed. By the time I made it back to my table, I had 4 New Deal proposals and 6 business cards from people I'd only read about in financial journals. Julian appeared at my elbow during dessert. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Privately?" I glanced at Patricia. She gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. She'd stay close. 5 minutes, I said. We walked out to the terrace overlooking the harbour. The night air was cool, carrying the salt scent of the ocean. Below us, the city glittered like a promise. "That speech," Julian said, "that was about me." "It was about survival," I corrected. "You just happened to be part of that story." He leaned against the railing, looking older than his 35 years, tired, defeated. "I signed the papers," he said, "delivered them to your office this afternoon. We're accepting your terms." Smart choice. Natasha left me. I blinked. That I hadn't expected. 3 months ago, he continued, said I was too focused on work, too emotionally distant, that she needed someone who was present. Ironic, isn't it? Karma isn't ironic, I said. It's just an efficient. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I destroyed the best thing I ever had because I was too stupid and selfish to see what I was losing. And now I'm standing here, watching you shine, knowing I gave up the one person who actually believed in me. Julian, I'm not asking you to forgive me, he interrupted. I'm not even asking you to understand. I just need you to know that I see you now, really see you, and I'm in awe of who you became. I looked at him. At this man who'd shattered me so completely, I wasn't sure I'd survive. At this man who represented everything I'd overcome. "The person you're in awe of," I said quietly, "exists because you left, because I had no choice but to build myself from nothing. So thank you, Julian, for showing me exactly how strong I could become." I turned to walk away. "Wait," he said, "is there any chance, any possibility that we could try again, that I could prove I'm different now?" I stopped, looked back at him over my shoulder. "No," I said simply, "because you're not asking because you love me. You're asking because you finally see my value. And Julian, that's not love, that's regret." I left him standing on the terrace, small and alone against the vastness of the city. The call came from Patricia at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. "We have a problem," she said, her normally unflappable voice tight with tension. "Get to the office, now." I was there in 20 minutes. The conference room was already full. My legal team, my financial advisors, and Patricia standing at the head of the table with a tablet in her hand and murder in her eyes. "What happened?" I asked. Patricia turned the tablet toward me. On the screen was an internal email chain from my own server discussing Meridian's acquisition strategies, confidential client information, and upcoming deal targets. The emails had been leaked to the Bellport Financial Tribune. The article was already live. "Who did this?" I asked quietly. "Graham." The name hit me like a physical blow. Graham Pierce, my CFO, the man I'd hired 3 years ago, the man I'd trusted with every aspect of Meridian's financial operations, the man I'd mentored personally. "Why?" "Money," Patricia said flatly. Julian's mother, Vanessa Brennan, offered him $2 million to sabotage us from the inside. She's been orchestrating a hostile takeover attempt. The leaked information gives their consortium the ammunition they need to undermine our credibility and poach our clients. I sat down slowly, processing the implications. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a coordinated attack designed to destroy everything I'd built. "Where's Graham now?" "Vanished, probably offshore. But there's more." Patricia pulled up another document. "He also emptied the discretionary fund, $12 million, into a shell corporation we can't trace. And he's been feeding Julian information about your personal finances for months." "Julian knew about this?" "We don't know yet. But given his mother's involvement, it's likely." The room fell silent as everyone waited for my response. This was the moment where leaders either crumbled or became legends. I stood up. "Call Reginald Cross," I said. Cross was the most ruthless corporate attorney in Bellport City. "I want Graham found and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Contact the FBI. Financial fraud across state lines makes this federal. Then draft a press release. Meridian Capital Holdings has discovered and is actively investigating internal financial malfeasance. We will cooperate fully with authorities and our clients' interests remain fully protected." "What about the Brennan Consortium?" asked Lila, my head of acquisitions. "Let them come," I said. "If Vanessa Brennan wants a war, we'll give her one. Pull every contract, every deal, every piece of leverage we have on Brennan and Associates. I want to know where they're vulnerable, and I want to know by end of day." Patricia smiled grimly. "I'll make the calls." The next 72 hours were brutal. The Tribune article did exactly what Vanessa intended. 3 of our major clients pulled their accounts, citing concerns about security and trust. 2 prospective deals fell through. The market value of Meridian dropped 18% in a single day. But while the consortium celebrated, I was building a counter-offensive. Reginald Cross discovered that Graham had been sloppy. He'd left a digital trail pointing to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The FBI opened an investigation, and more importantly, Cross found communications between Graham and Vanessa Brennan that proved the conspiracy. Meanwhile, Lila uncovered something extraordinary. Brennan and Associates was hemorrhaging money. The restructuring deal we'd offered was their only lifeline. But Vanessa, too proud to let me control the family business, had convinced the board to reject it and pursue the hostile takeover instead, using money they didn't have. They were betting everything on destroying me, which meant if I survived, they would collapse. The showdown happened at an emergency shareholders meeting. Vanessa had called it, thinking she had the votes to force me out of my own company. She was wrong. I walked into that boardroom with Reginald Cross on one side and Patricia on the other. The room was packed. Every board member, several major investors, and at the far end of the table, Vanessa Brennan herself, dressed in Chanel and dripping with the confidence of someone who thought she'd already won. Julian sat beside her, looking miserable. "Shall we begin?" Vanessa said coldly. I believe we have enough votes to remove Ms. Reeves from her position as CEO and majority shareholder due to financial mismanagement and breach of fiduciary duty. You don't, I said simply. She smiled. I assure you, we do. You don't, I repeated, because 3 of your consortium members just withdrew their support. I nodded to Reginald, who distributed documents around the table. These are signed affidavits from members of your group. When they learned you'd orchestrated corporate espionage and financial fraud, they decided prison wasn't worth whatever you promised them. Vanessa's face went pale. Additionally, Reginald continued, the FBI is currently executing a search warrant at your personal residence and Brennan and Associates offices. The evidence linking you to Graham Pierce's fraud is overwhelming. You're going to be indicted for conspiracy, wire fraud, and corporate espionage. The room erupted. I watched Vanessa Brennan, this woman who'd never thought I was good enough for her son, who'd orchestrated my destruction because she couldn't stand seeing me succeed, realize that her entire world was collapsing. This is impossible, she whispered. No, I said quietly. This is consequence. You underestimated me. You thought I was still the broken girl your son divorced. You thought I'd fold under pressure. But I didn't build Meridian by being fragile, Vanessa. I built it by being smart enough to see enemies coming and ruthless enough to end them. I turned to Julian, who looked like he might be sick. Did you know, I asked, about your mother's plan? No, he said immediately. I swear, I didn't know about Graham or the fraud or any of it. When she told me she had a way to fix things, I thought she meant legitimate business strategies. But you didn't stop her. I didn't know I needed to. His voice broke. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. For all of it. I believed him. Strangely, I believed him. Julian was many things. Weak, cowardly, emotionally stunted. But he wasn't a criminal. He was just a man who'd always let his mother make his decisions. Vanessa, I said, looking back at the woman who'd tried to destroy me, you have 2 choices. 1, you step down from Brennan and Associates Board immediately, resign all operational roles, and accept whatever plea deal the FBI offers. 2, I bury you. I pull every piece of leverage I have. I ensure you serve the maximum sentence, and I make certain your name becomes synonymous with corporate fraud in this city. You wouldn't, she hissed. Try me. We stared at each other across the table. 2 women from different worlds. 2 women who'd both underestimated each other. She blinked first. I'll step down, she whispered. Good, I said. Now get out of my boardroom. I thought winning would feel better. The FBI arrested Graham Pierce in Grand Cayman 3 days later. Vanessa Brennan stepped down from the board and immediately lawyered up. The Tribune printed a retraction and apology. Our clients returned. The market corrected. Meridian was safe. But I felt hollow. It was 2 a.m. and I was standing in my penthouse, staring out at the city I'd conquered, feeling absolutely nothing. I'd built an empire. I'd destroyed my enemies. I'd proven every doubter wrong. And I was completely, utterly alone. The penthouse was silent except for the hum of the climate control system. 5,200 square feet of Italian marble, custom furniture, museum-quality art, the kind of space that appeared in architecture magazines, the kind of space that screamed success. It felt like a mausoleum. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Can we talk, please? I stared at it for a long time. This man had broken me. His family had tried to destroy me. And yet, some small, stupid part of me wanted to answer. wanted to believe that maybe, somehow there was a path forward. But I knew better. I'd learned the hardest way possible that some betrayals can't be forgiven, that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt, that the cost of loving someone who hurt you is losing yourself all over again. I deleted the text. Then I opened my laptop and did what I always did when the silence got too loud. I worked. There was a struggling tech startup in Portland that needed restructuring, a manufacturing company in Ohio that was going under due to mismanagement. A dozen opportunities to build something, save something, prove something. But that night, for the first time since Julian had left me, I closed the laptop without accomplishing anything. And I cried, not for him, not for the marriage I'd lost or the child who never lived. I cried for the version of myself who'd believed that being strong meant never breaking, for the years I'd spent building walls instead of connections, for the success that had cost me everything except money. I cried until there was nothing left. And then I slept. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or left behind, this part is for you. If you've ever built yourself back from nothing and wondered if the cost was too high, this is for you. Hit subscribe to join this family at Mr. Douglas Tales, because every story of rising demands we first acknowledge how far we fell. Now, let's finish this journey. The answer came from an unexpected place. 3 weeks after Vanessa's arrest, I received a letter. Not an email, an actual handwritten letter delivered by courier to my office. It was from Natasha Collymore. I almost threw it away. This woman had been Julian's upgrade, the person he'd left me for, the woman who represented everything I supposedly wasn't. But curiosity won. Dear Ms. Reeves, I realize you have no reason to trust me or care about what I have to say, but I need you to know something that Julian will never tell you himself. When he divorced you, I thought I was getting a man who knew what he wanted, someone decisive, strong, emotionally available. What I actually got was a man haunted by the worst decision he ever made. For 3 years, I competed with a ghost. Your ghost. He talked about you constantly, wondered where you were, what you were doing, if you were happy. Every business success he achieved was measured against what he imagined you'd think of it. Every failure reminded him of how he failed you. I left him because I realized I could never compete with his regret. I'm not writing to defend him. I'm writing because I read about what his mother did, and I know, better than anyone, that Julian had nothing to do with it. He's weak, yes. He's emotionally stunted, absolutely. But he's not malicious. He's just a man who made a catastrophic mistake and has been drowning in it ever since. You owe him nothing, but you deserve to know that the man who left you isn't the man who exists today. Respectfully, Natasha Collymore. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called Patricia into my office. What do we know about Brennan and Associates' current status? I asked. She pulled up the file without hesitation. After Vanessa steps down, the board promoted Julian to chairman. They're still operating under the restructuring deal you offered. Financially stable, but restricted by the terms. They've lost several major clients due to the scandal. Revenue is down 40%. They're surviving, but barely. And Julian personally? Living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside. Sold the penthouse to cover legal fees for his mother's defense. Drives a 6-year-old sedan. By all accounts, he's working 18-hour days trying to rebuild the company's reputation. Riverside, the same neighborhood where we'd lived together before everything fell apart. He'd gone from the top of the city to the place where we'd started. Get him on the phone, I said. Are you sure? No, but do it anyway. 10 minutes later, Julian's voice came through the speakerphone. He sounded exhausted. I didn't expect to hear from you, he said quietly. I didn't expect to call, but I read Natasha's letter. Silence. Then, she wrote to you? She did. And before you ask, I don't know if I believe her, but I'm willing to have a conversation. One conversation. Off the record. No lawyers, no assistants. Just you and me. When? Tonight. 7 p.m. The harbour. Promenade, south entrance. Don't be late. I hung up before he could respond. Julian arrived 5 minutes early, wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. He looked more like the man I'd married than the executive I'd faced across the boardroom. Smaller somehow, more human. We walked in silence along the promenade as the sun set over the water, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. I don't expect forgiveness, he finally said. I don't even expect you to believe that I've changed, but I need you to know that leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. Not because of who you became, although watching you build Meridian has been humbling, but because of who you were. You believed in me when no one else did. You supported me when I had nothing to offer in return, and I repaid that by abandoning you at your lowest moment. Yes, I said simply, you did. I was raised to believe that weakness was unacceptable. My mother drilled it into me. Brennans don't fail, Brennans don't break, Brennans don't show emotion. When you lost Lily and fell apart, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to grieve and be strong at the same time. So I ran. I chose the path that felt safe and easy. I chose wrong. We stopped at a bench overlooking the water, the same bench where he'd proposed 7.5 years ago. Do you know what I learned after you left? I asked. I learned that strength isn't the absence of breaking. It's what you do after. It's choosing to get up when staying down would be easier. It's building something from nothing because the alternative is giving up. You taught me that, Julian. By leaving, you taught me exactly how strong I could become. I know, and I'm grateful you survived my cruelty, but I'm also devastated that it took my cruelty to reveal your strength. I looked at him, really looked at him, saw the shadows under his eyes, the weight of regret in his shoulders, the genuine remorse in his expression. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing, he said. I want nothing from you. You've already given me more than I deserve by restructuring the company and not letting my mother's actions destroy what my grandfather built. I just wanted you to know that I see you, that I'm sorry, and that if I could go back and be the man you deserved, I would in a heartbeat. You can't go back, I said. None of us can. I know. We sat in silence as night fell around us. The city lights reflected off the water, shimmering like possibilities. I'm not the same person you married, I finally said. That woman is gone. She died in a hospital room and was buried next to our daughter. The person I am now, I built her from scratch. And she doesn't need saving. She doesn't need a partner to make her whole. She doesn't need anything she doesn't already have. I know, he said again. But, I continued and saw him tense. That doesn't mean she can't choose connection, can't choose to let someone in who's proven they've learned from their mistakes, can't choose to see if two people who've been broken and rebuilt can fit together differently than before. He turned to me, eyes wide with something that looked like hope. I'm not promising anything, I said quickly. I'm not saying we can fix what was shattered, but I'm willing to see if we can build something new. Not husband and wife, not business partners, just two people who share a complicated history and might be able to create a different future. I don't deserve that chance, he whispered. No, I agreed. You don't. But I'm not offering it because you deserve it. I'm offering it because I deserve to stop being defined by what you took from me. I deserve to choose forgiveness, not for you, but for myself. A tear rolled down his cheek. I won't waste it, he said. I swear to you, I won't waste it. We'll see, I said. Time will tell. The confrontation I needed wasn't with Julian, it was with myself. A month later, I found myself back in the office of the grief counsellor I'd seen briefly after the divorce. Dr. Linda Hart, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a practice that specialized in trauma and loss. I didn't expect to see you again, she said gently. The last time we spoke, you were determined to prove you didn't need help. I didn't think I did, I admitted. I thought success was the same as healing. And now? Now I have everything I thought would make me whole. Money, power, respect, a company I built from nothing. And I'm still empty. Dr. Hart nodded. Tell me about Lily. The name hit me like a freight train. I hadn't spoken it aloud in 7 years. I can't, I whispered. You can. You just don't want to. Because if you talk about her, you make her real. And if she's real, then losing her is real. And if losing her is real, then you have to feel it. The tears came suddenly, violently. 7 years of grief I'd packed away while building an empire. 7 years of rage at a universe that took my daughter and gave me nothing in return. 7 years of pretending that success could fill the void left by a child who never got to exist outside my body. I wanted her so much, I sobbed. I had names picked out, a nursery planned, dreams of who she'd become. And then she was just gone, and Julian left, and I had nothing, so I became nothing. I erased the person who loved and lost and hurt, and I built someone who couldn't be touched. And now? Dr. Hart asked gently. Now I'm tired of being untouchable. I'm tired of winning at the cost of feeling. I'm tired of being the woman who survived Julian instead of the woman who loved him. So what do you need? I looked up at her, this stranger who saw me more clearly than anyone. I need to forgive him, I said, not because he deserves it, but because I can't carry this anymore. I need to put down the rage and the hurt and the betrayal, and I need to choose something different, something that lets me live instead of just succeed. And do you think you can? I don't know, I admitted, but I'm going to try. 6 months later, Julian and I had been something, not dating exactly, not friends. We met once a week for coffee or walks along the harbour. We talked about everything except the past. We built something small and fragile that didn't have a name. Brennan and Associates was recovering under his leadership. He'd made hard decisions, cut unnecessary expenses, let go of toxic board members, refocused the company on sustainable growth instead of flashy deals. He worked with humility instead of ego. He was becoming someone I could respect. Meridian continued to thrive. We'd expanded into 3 new markets, acquired 4 companies, and I'd been featured on the cover of Forbes under the headline, "The Billionaire You've Never Heard of." The article called me a corporate enigma, powerful but private, wealthy but grounded, successful but somehow still mysterious. They had no idea how hard I'd fought to become that person. On a Tuesday morning, Julian showed up at my office unannounced. Patricia tried to stop him, but I waved her off. "What's wrong?" I asked, seeing the tension in his face. "Nothing's wrong," he said. "Something's right. I need to show you something." He handed me a folder. Inside was the dissolution paperwork for the restructuring agreement. Brennan and Associates was petitioning to buy out Meridian's controlling interest at full market value. It was a massive payment, easily $200 million. "What is this?" I asked. "Freedom," he said simply. "I don't want you tied to my company because of a deal you made when I was desperate. I want you free to choose whether or not to be in my life. And I can't ask you to choose me if you're financially bound to my success. Julian, this will cost you everything." "No," he said quietly. "Losing you cost me everything. This is just money." I stared at the papers. This was it. The final severing of all business ties. The end of the power dynamic that had defined our reconnection. It was terrifying. It was also exactly what I needed. "Okay," I said. "I'll sign on one condition." "Anything." "You attend grief counseling with me. For Lily. We never mourned her together. We both ran in different directions. And if we're going to build something real, we need to do it on a foundation that acknowledges what we lost." His eyes filled with tears. "I'd be honored." We signed the papers together in my office. Patricia witnessed. And then Julian and I walked out of Meridian Capital Holdings as equals. No leverage, no debt, no power games. Just two people who'd hurt each other and were choosing to try again anyway. I stood in the cemetery on a cool autumn morning, holding a bouquet of white lilies. Julian stood beside me, his hand warm in mine. We'd come to visit the small memorial we'd finally placed for our daughter. Not where she was buried, because there was no body to bury, but in a corner of Riverside, Memorial Gardens where we could come and remember. The stone was simple. Lily Brennan Reeves, forever loved, forever missed. Our daughter who taught us about love through loss. "I wish I'd done this sooner," Julian said quietly. "I wish I'd been strong enough to face this with you the first time." "We weren't ready then," I said. "Neither of us. We needed to break and rebuild separately before we could stand here together." "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" I smiled through tears. "I think she'd be frustrated it took us so long to figure it out. But yes, I think she'd be proud." We stood in silence, honoring the child who existed for too brief a time, but shaped everything that came after. Julian and I weren't married, might never be again. We'd learned that legal bonds don't guarantee emotional ones, but we were partners in grief, in growth, in building a future that honored our past without being imprisoned by it. Brennan and Associates had become a leader in sustainable urban development. Meridian had expanded globally, and together, keeping our businesses separate but supporting each other's visions, we'd created something neither of us could have built alone. I was no longer the woman Julian had left. He was no longer the man who left me. We were both something new, something better, something earned through pain and time and the choice to not let betrayal be the end of our story. As we walked back to the car, Julian turned to me. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me a chance I didn't deserve." "Thank you," I replied, "for becoming someone worthy of it." The sun broke through the clouds as we drove back to the city, back to our separate homes, our separate companies, our intertwined lives, back to a future we were writing together, one choice at a time. I'd started with nothing. I'd built an empire, and I'd learned that the greatest power wasn't in revenge or success or even forgiveness. It was in choosing who you became after the world broke you. If you've walked with me through this entire journey, from abandonment to empire, from betrayal to rebuilding, from rage to redemption, then you understand something essential. You are not defined by what was done to you. You are defined by what you built after. Every person who underestimated you gave you fuel. Every person who left you gave you freedom. Every moment you thought you couldn't survive became proof that you could. And when the world tells you that you're not enough, remember, they're measuring you against their standards. But your rise isn't about meeting their expectations. It's about exceeding your own. To everyone rebuilding themselves in silence, I see you. To everyone who chose strength over bitterness, I honor you. To everyone who walked away from what broke them and built something new, you are extraordinary. Your story isn't over, it's just beginning. If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe for more stories from Mr. Douglas Tales, where every fall becomes a rise, every ending becomes a beginning, and every betrayal becomes the foundation for something greater. Because you deserve stories that remind you of your power, and I'll be here, telling them, for as long as you need to hear them.